This is Note-Taking Guide 1.5, More Factoring, for Math 3. We're going to just start by reviewing how to multiply using a box a couple of binomials together. So our binomial was 2x plus 5 and then x plus 3. We wrote our 2x plus 5 along the top of our box and our x plus 3 along the bottom of the box, and then we're just going to use the two boxes together in order to find the number. So in this case it would be 3 times 2x, which is 6x. And then over here you do 3 times 5 to get 15. Then you go top to bottom, so you use the 2x and the x right here, and that's going to get you 2x squared. And then the last box will be the x times the 5 to get 5x. Then what you would do is you just would combine like terms right here, so you have a 6x and a 5x. So you're going to write those as 2x squared plus 11x plus 15. So we use our box to combine our like terms and to just multiply two binomials together. So we're going to use this information to go backwards today and do something called factoring. So before we showed you how to factor when there wasn't a number out here in front of the x squared. When there's a number out here in front of the x squared, the easiest method to use is the box method. So let me show you how that works. The first rule of the box method is to take the first number and put it in the first corner of your box. Then take the last number and put it in your last box. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take those two boxes and you're going to multiply them together. So when you multiply them together, you get a negative 77x squared. So I know that my two numbers that are going to go into the box are going to multiply to a negative 77x squared. But this guy up here, he's feeling left out, so we want to use him for something. So we're going to use him to make sure that our numbers will add up to that. So we know our numbers have to multiply to a negative 77x squared, and they have to add to a 76x. So then I would just start listing my factors of 77. So I know I could do 1 times 77. I could do 11 times 7 also. But 11 and 7 are not going to get me to add to 76, where I can get the 1 and 77 to if I put the 77 as positive and I put the 1 as negative. Once I figure out what my two numbers are, I know that I have to add some variables on them because they need to multiply to an x squared. So I know I'm going to put an x on each one of those. I'm going to decide which box I want to put them in. It doesn't really matter which box you put them in, but I always like to put them by the box I think that they look nicest next to the number by. So I'm going to put the 77x in this box, and I'm going to put the negative 1x in this box. And again, you could do it the opposite way. Your numbers would just end up different while you're multiplying, but the result would be the same. All right, so once we have that done, what we're going to do is we're going to look at these top two numbers right here, and we're going to find the greatest common factor. And we're going to pull it out to the left-hand side of our box. So the greatest common factor of those two numbers is 7x. And then we're going to turn this into a multiply problem just like we did a second ago. So 7x times what gives me 7x squared? That would be x. Then use the 7x to come this direction. 7x times what gives me the 77? That would be 11. Then come up here to the top with this x up here and come this direction. So what did you multiply x by to get to negative 1x? You multiplied it by negative 1. And then just check your back to make sure it works. 11 times negative 1 is negative 11, so that worked. Once you have the box finished like this, it's just a matter of rewriting our factors. Here we have x plus 11. And here on the other side we have 7x minus 1. So that is how we factored this particular problem. All right, let's try another one. Again, the first step is to take the first number and put it in the first box. the last number in the last box, and multiply them together. So those multiply to be 24x squared. And then this guy that didn't get used, you have to make sure that your numbers add up to be him. So you're going to list your factors of 24. You could do 1 and 24. You could do 2 and 12. You could do 3 and 8. You could do 4 and 6. You're going to find the two numbers that will get you to 11. And that would be 8 and 3. So check your signs to make sure they're right. If I multiply them together, they'll be positive 24. If I add them together, they'll be positive 11. So I'm going to throw them up in the boxes. It doesn't really matter where they go, but I think the 8 looks nicer next to the 4, and I think the 3 looks nicer next to the 6, so I'm going to put them there. My next step is to take the greatest common factor out of these two top numbers up here and put it to the left-hand side. My greatest common factor is 4x. Then we turn this into a multiply problem. 4x times what gives me 4x squared? That would be x. So again, that top number x and the side number 4x multiply to be that box's value right here. Okay, what do you multiply 4x by to get to 8x? That would be 2. What do you multiply x by? Now we're going to this next one down here. What do you multiply x by to get to 3x? That would be 3. And then check the back to make sure it works. Did the 3 times the 2 work? It did. It gave me 6. So I have my two factors there now for my answer. On the top I have x plus 2 because the 2 was positive. On the bottom I have 4x plus 3. Alright, another one of the same thing here. First step, put the first number in the first box, put the last number in the last box, and then multiply them together. So a negative 21x squared. Our two numbers have to multiply to that and add to negative 4x. So I would list my factors of negative 21 or 21 and then change the signs on them. I think I'm going here with 7 and 3. I have 1 and 21 or 7 and 3. 7 and 3 will work if I put a negative on the 7 and keep the 3 positive. Again, I have to throw my x's on them to get to the x squared and to the x. And then I'm going to choose which boxes to put them in. I think the 3 looks nicer next to the 3. And the negative 7x looks nicer next to the negative 7. The next step is to pull the greatest common factor out of the top, which would be a 3x, and then turn it into a multiply problem. What do you multiply 3x by to get to 3x squared? You multiply by x. What do you multiply 3x by to get to 3x? That would be 1. What did you multiply x by to get to negative 7x? It would be a negative 7. And then check these back two numbers to make sure they worked. So the negative 7 times the 1 gave me negative 7. It did work. So I did it correct. I write my factors from the top, x plus 1, and from the side, 3x minus 7. More of the same problems here. Just another example. Again, the first step is to take the first number and put it in the first box, the last number in the last box, multiply them together. This is a negative 120 x squared. So my numbers have to multiply to a negative 120 and they have to add to be this middle number here, which is a negative 17x. Now I'm not going to list my factors anymore because right off the bat I remember that 10 times 12 gives me 120. If you're thinking right here that I made a mistake, you're absolutely right, you guys. I was just going too fast on this and I didn't multiply this right. So let's go back and take a look at that again. Sorry about that. When we multiply those together, I actually get negative 60x squared. And I'm going to find two numbers that will multiply to negative 60x squared and add to negative 17x. So I'm thinking about 20 and 3 here. If I put a negative on the 20 and leave the 3 positive, it will multiply and add right. I think I'm going to put the 3x in this box this time. It looks nice next to the 12, and I'm going to put the negative 20x here in the bottom box. The greatest common factor comes out of the top, which is a 3. So what did I multiply the 3x by to get to 12x squared? I multiply it by 4x. What do I multiply 3x by to get to 3x? That would be a 1. What do you multiply 4x by to get to negative 20x? That would be a negative 5. Check the back to make sure you have it right. Okay, this says to factor and solve. So after we get this factored like this, we're going to have to set it equal to 0 and solve. When we set this equal to 0 and solve it, it always comes out as the opposite of this number over that number. And we've talked about that in class a ton of times. So the reason that that happens is because if I were to solve this equation right here, this one, I'd have to add 5 to the other side and then divide by 3. So it's easier just to memorize how it comes out. All right, we're going to skip a couple of these problems because this note-taking guide is getting rather lengthy here. So let's jump down to looking at the greatest common factor. We want to make sure that we're looking for a number that these numbers have in common in order to factor it out of it. So when we're looking at the 2n cubed minus 20n, we can see that they're both even numbers, so we know we can take a 2 out of them. And they all have an n in them. Actually, they both have 2 n's in them, so I want to factor out a 2n squared. Then I'm just going to ask myself, what did I multiply 2n squared by to get to 2n cubed? Well, I multiplied it by n. And what did I multiply 2n squared by to get to negative 20n squared? That would be a minus 10. So that was called factoring out the GCF, or the greatest common factor. You're looking for the biggest number and the biggest variable that will divide into both of them. Same thing here. Let's take a look at this one and just do it real fast. They're both even numbers, so I can take out a 2. They both have at least one x in common, so I'm going to take out an x. What did I multiply 2x by to get to 4x squared? I multiplied it by 2x. And what did I multiply 2x by to get to 10x? That would be 5. So that's the way greatest common factor works. That's going to help us on this next problem where we have to factor out a greatest common factor before we can do the box method. So these all have a 2x in common here if we look at them. So we're going to just factor that 2x out. When we do that, what did we multiply 2x by to get to 2x cubed? We multiplied by x squared. What did we multiply 2x by to get to 22x squared? That would be 11x. And what did we multiply 2 by to get to 56x? That would be 28. All right. So now that we've done that, we have our GCF out. I like to just remind myself that that GCF has to be written in my answer, but I'm not going to worry about it for a minute because I need to look at this now and see if I can factor this. Now that this number out front right here is 1, I can just factor with the method that we've used before without the box. I can separate that x squared into x times x, and then I need to find my two numbers that will multiply to 28 and add to 11. Numbers that will multiply to 28 and add to 11 are 3 and 8. So they both have to be positive in order to work. And so if I were to factor this completely, I would have 3 answers here, or 3 parts to my equation. 2x times x plus 8 plus x plus 3. It asked me to solve that, so once I need to solve that, I'm going to set every part of this equation equal to 0. And I've taught you how to bring these out several times now, but let's just take a look at them really fast to make sure we know. In order to get this one, we would have to divide by 2, and 0 divided by 2 is still 0. Here we would subtract 8 to the other side, and we get x equals negative 8, and here we would subtract 3 to the other side to get x equals negative 3. I knew that this was going to have at most 3 answers because we've been talking about finding the degree. If we know the degree, we know how many possible solutions our graphs will have. These solutions that we did find are called x-intercepts or roots. It's where our graph crosses or touches the x-axis. Thank you for watching. Hope you learned something.